Welcome back to Where You Live with Gene and Tony. We're talking to you about this story from the Sacramento Bee. It is a hub of news and information. The Sacramento Bee. Mm-hmm. That's a cute little name for a newspaper.
Yes.
And what they're talking about, though, is what's not too cute is the city of Sacramento had bad billing information on a homeowners association and said after 2 years, oh, by the way, you owe over $11,000 to one HOA.
Who? Where? What? When?
Yeah.
Why? How? Who?
That was exactly what they were thinking.
That's how the association felt.
And the thing that was interesting is, as we before we went to break here, Tony, was that there was this feeling that, well, if you didn't bill us, that's your fault, not ours. And so the feeling is you should just let the bill go.
We shouldn't have to pay it.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think you're responsible for paying for what you used.
Oh,
don't you think?
Exactly.
I think there's definitely room for negotiation over late fees and fines, but
or payment plan, because
or make a payment,
if
like
you allowed,
said you did, right?
If you allowed someone the opportunity to do something over a few year period of time
to get it paid.
I mean, yeah,
that's all reasonable. I think that's all reasonable. But to say I'm not going to pay it at all because you forgot to bill me, it's not a reasonable response.
It makes me think, where were some of the other things that we see cities do? I mean, if you don't pay your water bill, they will shut off the water.
Yeah. Well, good point. Why
didn't they shut off the water?
They didn't do that.
Because don't you think that instead of allowing someone to go 2.5 years, that would allow someone to say, oh, wait a minute.
Well, I think there was something broken in the bureaucracy,
yes.
Obviously. That still does not mean the users shouldn't pay for the water.
Yes. And so, yes, I think what we're saying is there should be understanding from the bureaucracy, from the large organization to understand. But by the same token, it's really unfair, I think, to say, well, because I wasn't billed, I don't think I need to pay.
And the illustration you give me often is, what if the shoe were on the other foot?
Exactly. I mean,
so explain that.
To me, that should be the test of whether or not what you're advocating for your homeowner association or advocating from the city is the other shoe test, and that is if you can say that if it were the other way around, if it were found out that the association had paid too much, and the association was owed $11,000 or $15,000, should the city say, well, I'm sorry, you paid the wrong amount
for 2.5 years?
Yes. And so
you never asked for it back.
You never asked for it back, so you shouldn't get it. That just doesn't seem to fly. People would say, no, wait a minute.
The other shoe test tells us that they owe this money and that they should pay for the water they used.
And that's just basic in property rights. I mean, what's one of the things that people are told anytime you go to a closing and purchase a home? They say we think that all of these are accurate. However, if there's something that's incorrect, here's another document. What's this document? This document is just to say that something's incorrect. You promise to come back and correct it.
That's right. But I bet you a lot of people in closings don't realize they signed that document because they don't pay much attention to what they signed.
I know. And to me, it just, the other shoe test, I think, really puts it in perspective.
It does
for folks.
very well.
And so, my hope is that Sacramento can say that they did the same thing that the fine city of Minneapolis finally did with the HOA that I was involved with, and that is they said, you're right. Someone finally said, cooler heads prevailed. They said, we will give some time period to pay it back. Yes, there should be no late fees. You're correct, there should be no interest, and you only owe the bill because they realized that there was responsibility that they had as well. So we hope that is what takes place in Sacramento. Hey, let's go to our next story. This one, Tony, is the one that I find a real interesting question to ask. What does it mean to give a meaningful notice to someone. We talked about that first story with Mr. Yirizari, who was upset because he got a notice from his homeowner association about parking. I mean, tell me, how many times do people get upset about getting a notice or even how the notice is worded?
Yeah.
I mean, there are times that people say, well, you were just busting our chops. You're being too difficult. And you read
I've had people say, you sent me this notice. What is this, some kind of threat? Are you threatening me? And
then you read the letter and it says, it has been brought to our attention that it may be the case.
Well, or even if I tell people, I need to tell you what the violation is and what the consequences are. I need to inform you of that. Would you rather I didn't tell you what the consequences were and just slapped you with consequences later? Yeah. That's what they see as a threat, is when you explain the situation.
Yes. And so here we have an interesting question, that is, what is the responsibility an association have to give notice to someone? Okay. And this could be of a meeting, of a change, of a violation.
Sure.
What does it mean? And what is it that
constitutes adequate notice or meaningful notice?
Yes, not only that, but then on the other side of the coin, and that is, what is it mean for the association to give a proper opportunity for people to be heard?
Okay.
That would be the second part. And it's interesting. Someone in talking about this discussion brought up Chapter 15 of Robert's Rules of Order. Isn't it interesting? It seems like a lot of what we deal with in terms of just how we relate to one another in an association really can be addressed in Robert's Rules of Order.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And here it says this. It says, Chapter 15 of Robert's Rules of Order. Every organization has the right to enforce its rules and expect ethical and honorable conduct from all its members. Most organizations have discipline problems from time to time. If the problem is not corrected when it arises, it can escalate into something more serious. That's exactly what we see. There's an issue and things escalate.
That's right.
Get out of hand.
If it's not addressed from the start, like the parking issue. It was addressed right at the start. Yeah. So it didn't escalate.
And in that case, we thought the association did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
But there are all kinds of issues that people have, right? It can be they installed a larger deck without obtaining or applying for approval from the association. A person could have a pet that is off leash. Okay. People have so much furniture stored in the garage, vehicles can't fit, so they have to park in other areas where they shouldn't. Those are common things we deal with all the time.
Yes, they are.
And what is important here is that an association does have several ways of addressing this situation with their members. But it's important to remember that, number one, you need to be fair and effective. Isn't that what that other association did? Mm-hmm. They were fair, and I thought they were effective. They didn't beat around the bush. But
they gave him notice, and he noticed the notice, so it was effective.
Yep. And now, depending on the nature, of course, of the misbehavior, the context of all of that, the manner in which an association uses in contacting that homeowner, I think, is very important, because that makes all the difference in the world. And that's what we get into the next piece, which is called due process. But I tell you what, before we do that, let's take a quick break right now. When we come back in our last segment, we will deal with the situation of due process. What should be the association's response in giving someone the opportunity to be heard? More on this after these messages.